Welcome, everyone. This is Liz Knuppel, President and CEO of Skystone Partners, and thank you for joining us today for our next installment of On Giving, Incisive Commentary and Analysis at the Intersection of Philanthropy and the Greater Good. Brought to you by Skystone Partners, where we believe philanthropy is a powerful force for good. I'm proud to welcome you, our attendees today, and our guests, Lisa New, President and CEO of Zoo Knoxville. You want to wave at us, Lisa? Thanks, nice to see you. And David Walsh, President and Chief Advisor of Canopy Strategic Partners. Hi, David, it's good to see you both.
Hi, Liz.
Hey. So our guests here today are experts in their respective fields of zoos and conservation management and strategic planning. I'd like to give you a brief introduction of them to you. Some of you came for Moving Millions Part 1, which was what's the importance of strategic planning in your successful campaign. Today is Part 2, and we're talking today about, now that you're into the strategic planning, when do you need to think about fundraising for those big vision, big goals? So let me tell you a little bit about Lisa and David if you weren't able to join us in Part 1. Lisa was appointed President and CEO of Zoo Knoxville in May 2013, which means she just celebrated her 10-year anniversary as CEO of Zoo Knoxville. With a graduate degree in animal behavior focusing on great apes, Ms. New has long been fascinated in the natural world and sustainable solutions for the future of wildlife, especially conservation strategies that engage local communities to support and peacefully cohabitate with wildlife through education and economic opportunities. In late 2013, Lisa launched a bold strategic plan for Zoo Knoxville that ignited the community. Since then, a comprehensive campus master plan, marketing and rebranding plan, and a $37 million capital campaign, the largest construction projects in the zoo's history have been implemented, featuring new engaging habitats for animals as well as for the guests. Since 2015, the zoo has annually broken attendance records with growth of over 30%, and with 2023 on track to welcome well over 550 guests. Habitats and guest spaces winning multiple awards have opened since 2017, including the new Gateway signature Boyd Family Asian Trek, with new habitats for tigers, white-naped cranes, gibbons, langurs, and a new cafe. All of this is what strategic planning can do for you. The new Clayton Family Amphibian and Reptile Conservation Campus opened in 2021 and features the animals and conservation work Zoo Knoxville is most well known for. Building a destination experience that serves as a catalyst for the city's growth and is an anchor attraction for the community is a key initiative for Lisa, and her passion is inspiring people to care about wildlife and wild places. Welcome, Lisa.
Thanks for having me.
Glad you're here. And David, let's talk a little about David. He is the President and Chief Advisor of Canopy Partners. David Walsh has spent his career connecting organizations with people and ideas to help them grow. David founded Canopy Strategic Partners to help cultural attractions, zoos, museums, and botanic gardens find the intersection between mission and margin. He's assembled a team of accomplished conservation professionals, researchers, and industry leaders committed to using their expertise to help mission-driven organizations create a better future for our planet. Canopy Strategic Partners is a full-service planning and consulting firm dedicated to helping mission-driven organizations, including zoos, aquariums, botanical gardens, conservation organizations, and other public green spaces, create a better future for the planet. Its team of distinguished yet down-to-earth industry experts has extensive experience collaborating with mission-based organizations of all sizes in all types of communities all across the globe. David has devoted the past 2 decades to sharing his expertise in business planning, market analysis, feasibility studies, financial planning, organizational dynamics, and governance studies. He's consulted with more than 150 cultural attractions to promote their missions, increase their impact, and promote their sustainable growth. As the architect of strategic plans, his greatest joy is seeing clients build on these foundations to reach new heights. David takes joy in fostering conversation across Canopy's networks of clients, elevating diverse voices through webinars and workshops like this one, and surfacing best practices from the conservation industry and beyond. His deep commitment to his clients is rooted in his belief that mission-based organizations improve the quality of life in their communities, and that their commitment to the conservation and the natural world is critically important to the planet's future, and that proper planning helps organizations balance their missions with the need for continued growth and long-term financial sustainability. Welcome, David. Glad you're here.
Thanks, Liz.
Thanks. So before we begin our conversation with Lisa and David, which is why we're all here today, I'd like to touch on just a couple of housekeeping items. The first one is about format. First, we'll have some discussion with Lisa and David about their experiences. And we have sort of an interesting new way that we've come up with our questions today. Then we'll have a few minutes for select questions from you in our audience before we wrap up our conversation. If you would like to ask some questions, please use the Q&A feature that's located at the bottom of your screen. And the chat feature that you used to say hello in, which we were glad to hear you and see you say hello, that feature has been turned off. So we'll be using Q&A for our questions and answers. Our question moderator and Skystone Partners senior consultant, Sally Lehman, will receive your questions. She'll be curating a number of them so our panelists have the opportunity to answer as many as we can without duplicates. I've asked Sally to moderate the questions this time around because when it comes to both governance and fundraising for nonprofit organizations and conservation organizations, she's a real pro, and particularly related to fundraising and strategic planning. She has extensive experience in volunteer leadership roles, including Cincinnati Zoo Foundation, Seven Hills School, and has served on the advisory board of trustees, and chaired one capital campaign committee and served on another. She's a former board member of Athletes for a Better World, where she led their strategic planning process, and is the past chair of the organization's John Wooden Citizens Cup fundraiser. In addition, she is currently assistant tournament chair of the U.S. Senior Women's Golf Association and chaired the Barrett Center Think Pink Luncheon 2 years in a row. So Sally is she's a powerhouse in and of herself, and she'll join us for the Q&A section. So let's get down to business. We have a premise for the day, which is you, dear attendees, you've done the work, you've engaged with your key stakeholders, and you've gathered the feedback that's helped shape the course of your organization's work for the next decade, or maybe 5 years. Part of that strategic plan is more efficient fundraising to further your mission and create more impact for your constituents. So how do you take this leap? And that's what we're talking about today. How do we take the leap from strategic planning to transformative fundraising? Well, we're going to find out with Lisa and David, but here's what I alluded to earlier. To prepare for today's conversation, Skystone Partners have interviewed a number of nonprofit executives to help drive the thoughts. The themes that we have identified through these thought-provoking conversations will guide us through the process of preparing a fundraising campaign to best communicate your organization's mission and goals to your potential donors. We're confident that you'll hear your own voices and the voices of your colleagues in the timely and relevant questions and discussion here today. So David, let's start with you. And I'm curious, what is the most common question that your clients ask you about when you do strategic planning? And what do you tell them?
Oh, from a timing standpoint, Liz, I think the question we get asked is, what's the best time to start a campaign? When should we launch our campaign? Mm-hmm. And I think what you want to do is start to build the foundation for your fundraising program, your capital campaign, as you're doing your strategic plan, starting to build those relationships, starting to make those connections, starting to cultivate potential donors and stakeholders as part of the process during the planning process itself, so that you are building those networks so that when you're ready to roll out your plan, that you already have a group of bought-in champions, bought-in advocates that then can help with the next steps of a true campaign, kind of the steps that I know you'll be talking about a lot, that you're much more the expert in from a pure fundraising standpoint, but that work, the timing really needs to begin as part of the strategic planning processing. And if to separate the two, I think is a mistake. You really want to have those very much linked together as part of an integrated planning process to really be thinking about that.
Excellent, excellent. So it's not separate, is what your experience has been, what you've seen, that engagement should happen then.
Yes.
Right?
Yep. Yeah. I think the successful organizations start to think about it early, but don't get too far ahead of yourself. It's like, oh no, we're not going to launch the capital campaign at the same time we're doing a strategic plan, or in some cases, hopefully you already haven't launched your capital campaign.
Right.
And it's, oh, we need a strategic plan after.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
That does happen sometimes. I think donors come back and say, well, what's your plan? And then we have to redo some things.
Yeah, I understand. And so Lisa, I know that actually you've done this. You've followed that sort of order of strategic planning first, fundraising sequentially, following upon that. But building on David's advice, what was your firsthand sort of boots on the ground experience, and particularly now as you're in your strategic master planning process now, what would you, from your firsthand experience as the CEO of a nonprofit organization, what did you see and how would you advise?
Well, to David's point, as part of the strategic planning process, our situation was unique in that we wanted a campus assessment as part of our strategic plan. And so for any organization that's doing a bricks and mortar capital campaign, that assessment as part of your strategic plan, I think, is really helpful. It's helpful to kind of shape where you have weaknesses and strengths as an organization, but it's also helpful in that engagement piece, to David's point, with donors and stakeholders and board members. And so, for us, there was that assessment, and then asking the community, through that process, what they loved and thought could be better. And that really drove a lot of the priorities to the plan, and so of the then master plan. And so a couple of things: the campaign or lack of campaign prior, the development and growth of the zoo prior to our strategic planning process. So in the years prior to my tenure, was really opportunistic grabs of projects. It didn't follow a strategic plan, and it didn't really follow a cohesive master plan. And so when we got to the point of doing that assessment, what we found was that we had pockets of greatness where this had kind of opportunistically happened across our campus, but it didn't really address guest flow, guest amenities, revenue and retail opportunities, food opportunities, and so it was very disjointed. And so that was a situation in my mind that, two examples here: one that lacked planning, and then one that did. And so, now we've completed that initial fundraising and capital campaign, and we're in a pause. And so during this pause period, we are regrouping. We have gone back as a board with our facilities and construction committee, and we have revisited that master plan that happened now almost 9-10 years ago. We've revisited that. It's changed. It's a living, working document. It's changed. Our priorities have changed based on how the zoo has grown. We've matched up what aspects of our business plan actually fell right in line with the growth of the master plan, and it followed or tracked ahead of the master plan build. And so all of that, now we've done that revisit, we've done that reprioritization of needs, and we're really just starting to gather steam and momentum as a board and a fundraising committee to take that next step.
Excellent. Excellent. David, you look like you had something at the tip of your tongue. No.
Nope.
Well, and I love what you're talking about here, Lisa, as it relates to the prioritization of needs, because you're in this in between, and in between often is a negative connotation. I don't mean it that way, but you're in this in between big growth phases where you're doing your assessment and your planning and revisiting the plan. And it leads really beautifully into one of the themes that we heard when we interviewed a number of attendees and leaders in the field about prioritization of needs. And one of the things that we heard is right on the money with what you said. Interviewees are keenly attuned to the importance, the folks we talked to, of having fully developed list of priorities, especially when there may be a mid-course correction in the fundraising plan. And so how can you, it sounds like you're doing some really amazing work to make sure there aren't bumps in the road, but you've done the assessment, but how can, either during strategic planning, master planning revisit, or new master planning, how can an organization really effectively do a backup prioritization in case there are bumps in the road that happen either because of construction or because of fundraising blips? And this is for both Lisa or David. So you do your assessment, you have your prioritization, but do you ever think about developing like a backup prioritization in case there are unforeseen circumstances that'll cause you to need to shift?
David, do you want to go, or you want me to hop in?
I'll say a couple words, but I think, Lisa, you probably could speak to it better. I think, to your point, Lisa, having the strategic plan and your master plan be living documents is important, because not everything you've set up in those plans is going to roll out exactly as you talked about when you first did the plan. So going in knowing that there needs to be some flexibility, you don't want this to be just an open plan, but having some flexibility, I think, is important. I'm not sure I'd call it a backup plan, but I'd call it having some options and alternatives to approach some of the priorities. And it could be either from a physical side or a programmatic side, based on resources, based on what's happening in the market. But two things I think are important from a strategic planning side is, one, having a group of stakeholders, whether it be staff, board, and other external stakeholders, as part of the process, in understanding kind of how you came up with the priorities, so that people have some knowledge of these are the priorities because of these things. Then it helps to say, someone coming in and say, well, why don't we do this first? You can say, well, we've looked at it, as part of this process, you were involved in these discussions, so that they're aware of the decision making. And my second point around kind of setting the priorities is coming up with some sort of decision making criteria, whether it be a filter, a matrix, to help you make those decisions, because you're not going to have anticipated everything as part of your strategic plan, but you can look at things from a mission fit, from a resource availability, from a staffing and expertise standpoint, what's happening in the community, those kind of things, and see how these different priorities match up to those. And so, flexibility is key, but you don't want to veer too far off your original kind of strategic direction.
Right, exactly. I like it. And you've said it, I think both of you have said it a couple of times, that this is a living, breathing document. It's responsive to so many things, to the resources that you have, whether they are financial resources, if it's mission driven, if there's part of your business plan that maybe has needed to respond to something else within your organization, that that you have those criteria for how we're going to shift, should we need to shift along the way. Excellent. And so at what point, David, in your opinion, at what point would you advise your clients when you're doing strategic planning? When do you know that plan is ready to be developed into the first storyline, right? Like into the first external story or case that you might start to float under your donors' noses as part of a feasibility study? Like, when's it ready?
Well, that is a really good question. It's ready when it's done. But I think when you have the agreement of all of those people participating in the process, and you do have to be like, yep, this is what we're going with, because going back to, it's a living document, some things will change. You're not going to get everything, every single thing right at the end, but you have to have this agreement around that direction, around your core mission and vision of what you want to accomplish. You know, more and more, it's, you know, the tactics will be developed over time. So don't get hung up on exactly the specifics, how you're going to get there, but you want to know where you're going to go. And so if you agree on what that destination is, that the how of getting there is going to evolve over time.
Yeah, and if I could just chime in a little on that, I think both with the original master plan that we produced and then this one, we're very much seeing the same sort of process in our key stakeholders, which are our board members, where first of all, to that backup plan, we didn't necessarily have a backup plan, but that backup plan was built into the overall master plan itself, in that, you know, we have a grand vision for the next 10 years, a huge master plan, realizing that most likely we're not going to hit that financial goal all at once. We built in the prioritizations of needs. And so then the process is that, you know, when we've revealed that both in the past and now to our board, we have had, well, why not this first? Why not that first? Why not? And so they're undergoing this sort of, and what kind of organization do we want to be? We also have some programmatic elements that have been built into our master plan that aren't necessarily bricks and mortar, but are still have a fundraising and capital need. And so it's begged that question too, of these bigger things of, well, are we drifting off of mission, or how does this fit in our mission? And so that's an organic process, and it's caused us to have to go back in both cases and test, like, oh, why would we not do an Africa in front of a herpetology exhibit? Let's test that in our business plan. And you know, sometimes there are facility related needs, you know, the facility's just falling apart and you've got to address that first. But in some of those cases, you know, by testing those questions that come up organically with your board, testing it against your business plan, we were able to show that, oh, well, if we put an Africa ahead of these other projects, we couldn't sustain it. We couldn't sustain that growth. And so then by doing that, testing it, and believe me, it's painful because you're ready to roll. And then that one board member's like, well, why are you doing it that way and that order? But by going back and testing, then you get all of your, in our case, all of our key stakeholders, our board members on board. And then why that's so incredible is that then, you know, the volunteers leading our campaign, we're all singing from the same sheet of music. And I must have heard a million times if I heard it once, even if we had all the money to do this all at once, we would still do it in this order, and here's why. And so I think that builds the buy-in, so that when you're ready to go to a feasibility study and test that with the community, you're testing a whole vision, and then it gives you some flexibility to pivot a little if you need to, but you're all in lockstep with why you're doing things in the order that you're doing. And the only other little small thing I'll say is, in building flexibility in that plan, we know the priorities of what we're going to build and why, but there may be projects of opportunity. So within our backup plan, you know, where we had the whole facilities committee really rank and prioritize, and we worked as a group, here are the things we must build and in what order. there were opportunistic grabs. Well, if we did get an extra 10 million, here are areas where we might want to expand on that.
Excellent, excellent. I love it when you say, Lisa, you want to test the whole vision. So David had said, well, the case is ready when the plan is done. And your further sort of CEO experience of, and the plan is done when you know your key stakeholders, your board members, understand the why, the how, and what order we're going to do it. And to have that, and that's a pretty incredible message to say, even if we had all the money in the world, we've designed a sustainable program for our organization so that we know that we're not getting out ahead of ourselves with either gaps in expertise or facilities or manpower or whatever. And I also really love the way that you positioned that projects of opportunity. So we know what our priorities are. David, as David had suggested, you came up with a number of decision-making criteria. And then, you know, if we did have an extra 10 million or 3 million or however many $1 million.
Yeah, or even in our case, you know, as we were going through the master plan, we saw, you know, our architect said, oh my goodness, you know, in this one piece of land, there is a parcel that could be developed into something. And here's what it could be. And as it turned out, you know, it's one of our most, I think it's a smaller exhibit, but it has a great guest experience. And again, it was being flexible and being able to add those things as the plan developed.
I love that. Which one is that, Lisa? Can I ask?
Our Langer exhibit.
Oh, I was gonna ask if it were the Langers. Yeah, because that is an amazing guest experience. So you've spoken really pretty well to engaging your key stakeholders, specifically about board members. And we've talked a lot about, we haven't spoken about it specifically being inclusive, the process being inclusive today. We did talk a lot about that last time. But how do you identify, and David, how do you recommend, and Lisa, how do you identify community members who may not be board members, but you may want to include them in some of the planning process? So other than, you know, community surveys or focus groups, sort of individuals you may bring in to engage as prospective donors, or you just need their buy-in. How do you pick those?
Well, I think you first start to look at kind of who are those who are in that closer in circle. And in a lot of cases, what we see are some public partners, whether it be city or county involvement. So having them as part of at the table early on is important. In other cases, some foundation folks both can help give you a better sense of the community kind of giving priorities in the community, whether or not that foundation would support a project that comes out of the plan or not. They at least have a really good pulse on what else is happening in that community. And the other thing, depending on kind of the community and the size of your community, there's typically a couple of key business influencers in the community. Some big corporations are very giving, philanthropic minded corporations that you want to have in. So as part of the strategic planning process, either early on or as the plan starts to develop more, you want to be showing them kind of, here's where the plan is, here's what's coming out of it. Because I think the worst thing is just to present it and say, here it is, here's done, here's all of our priorities, and would you help? If you get their buy-in along the way, it becomes a lot easier for those conversations down the road as you're moving forward. So
for sure. Lisa, what's your experience been in how you help to identify sort of inner circle folks? How did you help identify non-board members?
Well, I think it's, you know, what David's saying in my mind sort of wraps up into the next step after your master plan is, it maybe you've involved stakeholders along the way. That's always great when you can do and test that. For us, we would we would do it as a smaller committee of the board and then have check-ins back with the board. It could be with key donors or things like that. But really, you know, your master plan is for the most part complete. Now it's time to take it to the community and do a financial feasibility study. And there's a few things that you would learn in that. You would learn, number one, does this plan resonate with you? So to David's point, getting that buy-in, not saying this is done, this is what we're going to do, will you give us money for it, but saying this is the vision of the zoo and the board. What do you think about it? Are there parts you love? Are there parts you hate? Is this something that resonates with you? And being able to then, you know, in our case, coming back and saying, you know what, there was no one there, they loved the whole vision. They loved and that is good feedback, but maybe what happens is that they come back and say they think it's too ambitious, or they really would love to see X or X developed. I also really believe that if you have worked and put together a great plan with great business plan that accompanies it, that's going to be a real confidence builder for them, because you've done a lot of work in that process.
Right. And
you know,
go ahead.
Well, and then just, of course, part of, you know, you've got the community excited about the plan. The question is, how much money can you raise?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
so again, that to me is this most critical next step, is talking to the philanthropic community and finding out how much money do you think you can is actually out there in support of this project.
Right. Absolutely. So potentially a little bit involving in the planning for folks who do design charrettes in your organization. Maybe that's a time with key business leaders and stuff. But Lisa, I hear you saying, you know, we've got the master plan. We feel good about it. We're excited about it. Now's the time to start looking at more and more those concentric circles, so to speak. You talk to your board and maybe some of your key donors, and then moving it on further out to see what you can actually achieve from a philanthropic standpoint. Yeah. So that brings us to the last question from the folks that we checked in with before today's session, which was a number of the people that we talked to felt strongly that they're going to need professional assistance when it comes time for a capital campaign, but the staff need to lay the groundwork for the campaign beforehand. And Lisa, I think both Lisa and David, you mentioned this earlier at the top of the hour, but what should the staff be doing now, even before the strategic planning starts, or in the midst of the strategic planning, before engaging fundraising counsel to help with a feasibility study, a fundraising feasibility study, or campaign counsel? What's going to set them up now?
Well, my chief development officer's on an attendee today, and he would come over and hit me in the head if I didn't say that our data is in good shape. So we've done a cleanup of our data, our donor database. We know what the low-hanging fruit is, and our systems and processes within our organization as a fundraising team are in order. So for me, that, and I know for my development team, that's key. And then secondly, throughout this process, so we finished a campaign, and, you know, realistically, we're in a small little project campaign now, but which is part of really cultivation. But, you know, we're realistically probably another year plus out from a full-fledged capital campaign. And so while we are in the process of getting our data cleaned up, doing an assessment of our processes, we are also cultivating friendships and stewarding past donors that we've had, because we don't want to just fall away from them for 5 years. They haven't heard a word from us, and now we're back. We need to maintain relationships with them, letting them know what's incredible and exciting about the zoo right now, and getting them kind of primed and ready, so that that they know us. We're active and present in their community. We're showing up for events that are important to them. We're a vibrant part of this community network.
Excellent. Excellent. That's a drop the mic moment, Lisa, that you're right on. But I'm going to ask David,
Well,
I wouldn't want to add on to that, David. Is there anything
No,
you?
I'm gonna say no. I can't add anything. That was perfect.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I just want to give my friends here, all of you friends here who are in the room, we're now going to shift over to the questions directly from our audience members today. And Sally, who is moderating the questions, I know that she's got at least a couple that have come in the door. Sally, would you like to join us? And let's find out what the first question on our attendees' minds are today.
Hey, Liz. And I've learned a lot just listening to you two. We've got one here that's a good thought, because not always do the funds come in the order or the way you want them. So you've got a master plan, and your second or third project that you're fundraising for failed to attract the required donations. Do you stick with it and add time to the plan, or do you pivot and change plan priorities?
well, I will jump in and very quickly say, I wouldn't, my preference would not be to fundraise for a project, but to fundraise for a vision. And so in doing that, unless there is funds designated and you're having trouble with designated funds, in our plan in the Dream Wilder campaign, we were fundraising for this vision, and of this vision, there were 6 projects. And so we weren't targeting one where but even so, there were times that we had to pause because fundraising wasn't going as quickly as we wanted. And maybe not that, the fundraising was on pace, the construction cost was escalating. And so we would have to pause and evaluate. But I believe what we did before and what we will do again is we will fundraise for a collection of projects, not just one. David?
Well, yeah, I agree, Lisa. But one thing I would go back if I were looking at this is to see why those projects weren't attracting the donor attention or engagement. Is it because it's not the right project? Is it because there's something flawed as part of that vision that you're selling? So you really want to analyze, getting back to some of the data, kind of what's not working. And do you need to adjust the plan at all? But I do think having it as part of a larger package and kind of a larger vision is important because, as we said, kind of has, it's not always going to be this exactly set in stone as you first develop the plan.
Great, thank you very much. And we've also had some questions about you've got your board buy-in, but some of these boards are public-private partnerships and maybe not handpicked by you. They may have been appointed by somebody outside your organization. So even if you have some buy-in, do you think it's a good idea to create a separate capital campaign committee or a steering committee that really is focused on the campaign? And how do you use them in conjunction with your board?
Well, I believe that, yes, you absolutely should have a capital campaign cabinet that's devoted. It could be an offshoot of your board's fundraising and development committee, or it could be a combination. But there are going to be a lot of people that would participate as volunteers and have great strategic thought about the philanthropic community that you can pull into that. And absolutely 100% of a 28-person board that I have, only a handful of them are fundraisers, and many of them don't want to fundraise. But but still being on our board the zoo needs to be, we ask that they all be fundraisers, and we ask that we have their philanthropic support. But what I talk about in that is you don't need to be the one doing asks necessarily if that's not where you're comfortable, but you need to have the zoo on your radar and continually thinking about how to expand our sphere of influence and open doors for us and introduce us to people in the community that maybe haven't got to know the zoo yet. And so, but that campaign cabinet are the pros in your community who know who the givers are, who have strategic thought about it, and who the community respects. That there has to be some high profileness to that cabinet so that they say, oh my gosh, you know, these two people, yeah, Sally and David are leading that campaign. This must be something really important.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Great, thank you. We haven't really discussed this, but it has come up in questions to us. And I think we have kind of a set answer that when you're in the midst of a capital venture, you see continued support and often even increased support down the line for your annual efforts. Talk a little bit about what you've seen in your experience with this, because that'll be very often with young or inexperienced nonprofits. They'll say, but this is really going to hurt our annual efforts. And oftentimes it happens just the opposite. So I want to hear from David with the organizations you've worked with, and Lisa, in your most recent experience, what you found.
Lisa, I'm going to toss this one back to you first.
Well, I would say that they don't have to compete, and they won't, because as you have people who engage and become interested in your vision, and they see a piece of their contributions in the success of the zoo, and you're going back, and you don't just take the money and run. You take the money and you thank them and you show them the impact of their gift, and then frankly, participating in your operational, your programmatic elements is a way to continue to cultivate them and stewardship of them. So, you're inviting them to join your donor level membership program or whatever that may be. There have been situations where I have had donors say, I can't give a $25,000 sponsorship to your gala and a $25,000 capital campaign. What is your priority? And we've talked through that and been able to help them direct their funds where they feel it's most impactful. But that really has been rare. It might be that their capital gift is going to be X and their operational gift is going to drop a little bit. But many cases, that's not the case. And it actually helps build your operational and programmatic support.
And Lisa, I think what you just said here is communication is key. If you are helping people understand what the impact of their gift has been and you're inviting them in to participate, then they're going to be excited about the vision and the mission, and you're going to collaborate, you're going to communicate and collaborate and find ways to make sure that everybody has a good place to help you realize the vision that you collectively want to see on the planet. Is that kind of what I hear?
Yep.
Yeah.
Got another question that's come in online. Can you talk about staff buy-ins? Because we understand, and we've seen this, and I've participated in one where, particularly at a zoo, you're going to be bringing donors onto the grounds to show them maybe some behind the scenes access, show them what you've built in the past so that they can see you're going to do it in a quality way. So it's going to take time on behalf of your staff, and whether you are an arts organization or a conservation, a zoo organization, how do you get staff to buy into the time it's going to take, as well as whether they will be able to make a gift that's above and beyond the norm that's expected for employees?
Well, I'll take, I think the first part is you really want to get them bought in and sell them the vision. Just like you're selling your external stakeholders, you want your entire team to see the vision and get excited about where your facility, where your organization is going, and so that they can really be looking forward to how the place will change, how it will improve, that they're like, yes, if this project, if this campaign is successful, this is really going to set us up for long-term success. So selling that vision. I'm gonna pass it to probably both Liz and Lisa on more of the specific question of getting employee gift, but I think with it, just like with any donor or supporter, you want people to buy in, and sometimes that buy-in is actually making a donation, even a small one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this question really is it about participation, or is it about, or should there be a push for a gift above and beyond what they might do or feel comfortable with in the past?
Go ahead, Liz.
I would say the answer to that is yes. It's not an either or. And it goes back to what David said. Ideally, in your organization, all of your staff members will be making some kind of a financial contribution. That isn't always the case, but ideally, they're doing work that they believe in so deeply that they do make a financial contribution on an annual basis that is in alignment with their means for something that is meaningful to them. And so should there be an additional, I'll call, air quotes, staff push, it's important to your community to see that the internal stakeholders of your organization are really bought in. With your board, you want to make sure you've got 100% participation and that everybody has made, hopefully, a multi-year commitment that is above and beyond what they ordinarily give to support annual programs. Pardon me. And your community, when there is something that is of such extraordinary need and vision that requires extraordinary funding, they want to know, the community outside of your organization wants to know that not only is your board bought in as the governing folks of your organization, but that all the people who are actually making this happen in the day-to-day have bought in as well. So we would recommend in every campaign that there be a staff campaign, a phase that is the staff phase of a special project or a capital campaign. But the answer is yes. And that isn't to say we're not putting the screws in, we're not twisting anybody's arms. And we often say, well, we work in the nonprofit world. Folks don't make as much money as they do in corporations. The fact of the matter is everybody should feel that they're being asked to give something that's personally significant, so that it gives until it feels good, not until it hurts. I don't know if that's helpful at all.
And I would say on that staff and board buy-in, we talked about the capital campaign cabinet. And in my mind, that's where subcommittees of that cabinet come in. So, you can have one subcommittee that is really driving 100% board giving, and then another subcommittee that's driving staff and volunteer giving, because volunteers are important too. And so, it might not be, in our case, it might not be a significant dollar amount. It might be, around $100,000 in a $37 million campaign. That wasn't what was important. What was important was that 80% of staff and volunteers gave. And that was something that we talked about over and over in the community. The other thing with staff giving is that in that subcommittee of that staff and volunteers, we had that be staff led. So not of the development team. We used some of our most informal leaders and our influencers within our organization that are well beloved to run that campaign with our guidance. And we did a lot of really fun things, dunking machines where I got soaked a few times, but we did a whole bunch of fun things just to drive that employee participation and tried to make it fun. But having cheerleaders on the front lines as part of that was really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're your best advocates.
Right.
And they can be unintentionally, sometimes, but unintentionally, some of your best fundraisers just by interacting with folks in the park.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Lisa, you talked a little bit about the fact that you're kind of in between campaigns at the moment and doing a lot of cultivation and stewardship and thanking you and that kind of thing. But most of these campaigns cover a 3 to 5 year plan. And did you have throughout those 3 to 5 years a stewardship plan that you could bring people in for everything from turning over the first piece of dirt to when a roof goes on to we finished this project and now we're getting ready to start this project? Did you have things along the way that you could bring your stakeholders in to wow them as well as thank them? Do you see that as part of a campaign?
Yeah, it's very much a part of feeling the momentum. We were fortunate that the city's gift to the campaign really front loaded our campaign. And so we were a little bit worried because we had not, my development director at the time and I had not ever done a capital campaign before. And so we were a little worried about, are people going to see this coming up out of the ground and think, well, they don't need money? But it was actually the opposite. The momentum of seeing this happen, that was really one of the greatest things that the city could have ever done, is to front load that gift for us, because it allowed us to get the plan in motion. And then throughout that time, we had a beautiful capital campaign piece, and we used it extensively, but we had topping, breaking ground ceremonies, topping off ceremonies, certainly lots of events that celebrated along the way. So when, the Boyd Family Asian Trek opened, we had an event that celebrated the gift of the Boyds. We did the same for our big leadership gifts as they hit milestones. So milestones all the way, and then really putting a bow on it at the end and having something that celebrated the entire success of the campaign with a donor wall unveiling. So all of that, I think, along the way is part of that cultivation. It builds excitement. People like going and seeing each other and interacting at those events. They were some of our really most special cultivation events, was celebrating.
All right, I got at least one more here.
Well, Sally, we got to make sure
right?
Lisa's got a fundraising appointment later this afternoon. So just last one, I think.
Last one. How do you balance raising funds for sexy projects while also raising funds for boring projects? I mean, we know sometimes buildings just need roofs, and other times you're building buildings for wonderful apes or great big elephants, or a new hall to perform in. So do you have any thoughts, David or Lisa, about how to balance those projects?
I'd go back to what Lisa said earlier. You're not just selling one project, you're selling a greater vision. So the infrastructure, the non-sexy stuff is packaged together with the sexy stuff, so that they're buying into the whole vision and what that will create for the organization.
What David said.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Sally, and David and Lisa. Thank you so much. Attendees, thank you for coming today. We had an opportunity to hear from three real amazing experts in the field about when it's time to start thinking about fundraising and doing about fundraising relative to your strategic plan. And I think what we've come away with is fundraising never stops. And we're always preparing and we're always working with our donors. Thank you all. Thank you, Lisa and David, for your insights and your thoughts today. Thank you, attendees. We hope we've made a difference to you all today with the insights from our conversation, and that your organization feels more prepared to move confidently in your next planning and fundraising steps. So great work, great insights. For those of you who are regulars and not regulars on Giving, we invite you to come next time around. We've had strategic planning and fundraising today. Our next conversation is actually Tuesday, June 13th. With Genevieve Shaker and Aaron Conley for their award-winning book, Fundraising Principles for Faculty and Academic Leadership. And I mention this specifically because this is fundraising for non-fundraisers. So even if you're not in an academic setting, if you have physicians, if you have vets, if you have curators, it'll be a really, really interesting conversation about fundraising for non-fundraisers. So again, thank you so much for a really fascinating conversation about how to move forward with the fundraising conversations. And we look forward to seeing you again very soon. Go forth, do good work. Philanthropy is a powerful force for good. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.